Yehuda after Yehuda is named from Mapam Oida. This time I will think this is the root of Oida, acknowledgement and surrender. In the soul of a Jew, this is the essential identity made of we bow and submit, acknowledging that everything comes from Atmas. Down here in this world, under the limitations of time, it's Apam thankfulness at certain times, not constant, because not all moments are equal. But above, in the source of the Neshama, beyond time, entirely the name is Yehuda with Yud, the letter of present tense, constant being, like Kachayas Eve. It's an ongoing state. Yehuda isn't just Oida, it's Yeda, a continuous acknowledgement in Bittul. There's even a hint from the Nekudas in the Chemia where it's written with the Segal to show this nuance. But this state does not appear in a vacuum. Hapam Oida comes after the birth of revelation of Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. They are the qualities that awaken the soul to come to the Seidah. That's why the pasuk says, "Yeducha achecha," your brothers bring you there. Reuven is from Reuben, seeing, the ability to behold Alikos, and Re'iyah brings Ava, love. Pnei Ari al Yamin. Ari is the same letters as Re'iyah. The camp of Reuven was south, Yamin, hinting to Chesed. Seeing things brings closeness, like it says. Seeing brings kira, pleasantness, desire to come close. That's kira Hashem, the awakening of the beloved relationship. The avodah of Sukkot is preparing for Shema. Just knowing Hashem is not enough. Knowledge stays hidden, like the Gemara says. Even a Ganav can call to Hashem in the tunnel, but doesn't change. To fulfill the Yahavta, the revelation must come first. The intellectual awareness, Yediyah, has to turn into the Iyah. This happens by speaking out of Him. His praises, contemplating that His kingship fills all worlds. Alf and the Vavan. Yet He is the same one, utterly alone, like before creation. Yachid Melech. And the truth of Yachid is atmos that is absolutely singular. Echad means drawing down of the Aleph into the Ches, the seven heavens and one earth, and the Dal, the four directions. And the all become nullified and included in the Aleph, in Him. Even the spiritual vitality is drawn up to its source, the Chashem, Gdula, etc. What remains separate, the Baruch Shem Kohen Chus L'Olam Vod, you can have separate worlds. This is only through Malchus, giving space for Amud Pro. That when a person contemplates this deeply, it leads to revealed love, Nichsva V'Gam Kol Sanafshei, and he fulfills V'Havta Hashem Alekacha, clinging to Ein Sof. Then B'Chol Avavcha, both inclinations, means the love of a Baal Tshuva. Tshuva isn't only for someone with literal affairs; it's the soul returning to its source. The Neshama was once completely absorbed in Atmos, and now it's confined in the body under time and place. Tshuva is the narrowness, Mitzrayim, that awakens bitterness over being stuck below. That bitterness creates a deeper love, like the Zohar. The Tshuva draws down light from Ein Sof with stronger force until the body and Nefesh, Habahamas, are transformed. This is Ruvain, the first paragraph, Shema, the running upward. Shimon is the second paragraph. Shemiah, hearing is from a distance. Hashem Shemati Shemecha. Yedesi, fear comes from sensing the infinite gap. Miyala Bahad Hashem, the left side pushes away, creating humility. This evokes Yed. That's why the people stood Mirachik by Sinai. Fear placed them back. That's the second parsha. Isamnu, the word of Yira. Reuven is seeing Ava. Shimon is hearing Yira. Both include mixtures, like Kira Hashem B'ani, where seeing includes Gvura, and hearing includes Chesed. They interlock. After Shema comes Levi, Emes, V'yatza, V'nachem, V'namba, V'nasa, V'nachem, V'naba, this is Yelava Ishia, like, connection, the middle line, Kala between Chesed and Gvura. Shmelet HaKadosh, V'minita Chabakeni, and this is Torah, Torah that comes down as water descending from on high. Even though on our own, Yallah B'had Hashem, still Hashem Himself descends through Torah. So Dafka, in Torah we can pull Atmos downward, and this draws oneness below, but all this, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, remains in the category of Mamali Kalam, drawing an icos into the worlds, even the highest level of love, Nixva, and Kulsa. It's still the soul yearning because it feels separate. Yehuda is different. Yehuda is Bittul Ben Siyas, complete self-nullification in Seva Kalam, and beyond Hishtashlos, where everything, spiritual and physical, is equal before him. This is when essay silent like the transcendent. Not an emotion of love. Self disappears, like bowing, falling completely before the king. Shtapchos, al chayk of, being nothing. To reach Yehuda, you first need Reuven, Shimon, Levi. Without them, Yehuda would stay makif, hidden, not revealing you. That's why you can't start Shemon Esrei called. Zimne, Shema, and Shemon Esrei in that order. Minachel, Kermalan, Shacharis. And Ma'ariv, let me restart again. This is Ratzai, Reuven, Shuv, Shimon, Kidov, Levi, Bittul, Yehuda. Seif Ma'aseh, Machshavat Chila. The end, Bittul, is rooted higher than the beginning. Love, there's the lower Haidah beneath Avon here, and there's the higher Haidah, the Yehuda of Bittul Mamish, like in Leshivisi with the Mamti, the quiet after the fire. And from here, Yehuda Yodcha B'Erev, the enemy's physical needs, the body of this world must remain Eidif, backside, not Panim. You do them, but like throwing something over the shoulder, externally, not with the inner chayis. Even when you must descend, it's Hashem's hand pulling your soul, you can transform. It stays in Eidif, but becomes included in your Decha. Yehuda's hand, Hashem's right hand, extended to draw you back. Teiv of Gashmis Nuchnis are equal. Everything is kula kamekalal chashiv. Kalam mamish, even chachma is asiyah there, so eating can be a keli to other cause. The power to bring all this out in Revelation, Yehuda Ata comes from Ishtachav Lecha B'nei Avicha. His Tachava is Amshacha. The balance is necessary to draw down this level. B'nei Avicha are the ones who have compassion and kindness, Daka Rachmim, especially Torah. Shema B'nei Musar Avicha. Torah comes from Chachma Av. There's learned Torah and Dugmils Chasad Mar B'nei Avicha. They give the neshama kayach to awaken love and awe, and from there reach Yudan and Bittel. That's the order. That's how the order becomes whole. Yodcha Yeducha Achacha leads to Yehuda Ata. Bir al Hanal. The tribes represent two modes of movement in Aveda, from below to above and from above to below. First is Amud Nukfa, rising from our efforts upward, and the second is Amud Chura, a flow from above downward. The souls of the tribes originate from Bria, so their natural Aveda is to rise from Bria to Atzilas, but their sherish is from the Yudbeis Gvuli Alachsan, within Zad Atzilas, called Shifta Yudke, which draw downward. So when we awaken from below, so the Lisata, we elicit the response from above, but the tribe of Ruvain, a movement from below to above, noticing the king's glory, draws the revelation from above to below. His name hints to Reuven and Aryeh, strength of seeing. Down here, this means striving to gaze at the king's glory, and it awakens a fierce love, Pnei Aryeh Yamin. And from above, it brings the high revelation of sight, the closeness of Ke'ata Yavani Ishi Vimini Techapkeni. So too Shimon from below him, Shemai Tishmu arouses from above. Shama Hashem Kisnu Anechi. Sight is closeness, hearing is distance. Hashem Shemati Shimcha Yeresi, like Habakkuk who was far, trembling. Distance creates a brokenness, a sense of being snua, meaning pushed away. Smeli Tachas Fareshi, that very state awakens the closeness from above, leading to Levi the connection. These three, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, are the three lines of Chachan, Chachma, Chesed, Netzach, Baga, Bina Gvura, Haid, and Dati Das Tferes Yisaid. Levi is the center line, the balance. Through these three we reach Yehuda, Yeducha Achacha, acknowledgement, surrender, Keser of Malchus. Malchus receives everything and has nothing of its own. Yet once she receives, she becomes the true ruler, like a king who gathers wealth from his people and still rules over them. Malchus's root is Keser. To meet in the Chol Tamid, and to reveal this requires drawing Keser into Malchus, which happens through the three kavim. Reuven corresponds to the first paragraph, Krishma, associated with the Shem Mab. Shimon to the second Shem Ab. Levi is the middle. Emes V'yatzim Anachan, the 15 above. The channel, the Hechel of Ratzin, higher than the Hechel Ha'ava before Shema. From there we enter the Hechel Kaidish Kadashim Adnei Svasei Tiftach Sibichus Geula Tefillah, and this becomes Yeduch HaChach, acknowledgement, Bittul, and Keser. But Tamad Milada standing. Standing is Tefillah. Kapali's air means Bittul, and silence, Keser, like where silence is the protection of wisdom. Yodcha Ba'edif Evecha, because Malchus has ascents and descents. Hapam Eide, and at night she goes down to purify Bias. It says V'tit and Teref, and the beer is only in the way of Achirai, because the inner, the Pneumius, is included like a nair in front of a torch without any beer. And the idea of Yishtachlecha B'nei Avicha, that they'll bow down to you, is the idea from Shacha, from Abba to Malchus. Abba Yastet Brata, that the father Chachma establishes the daughter. Geducha Achacha, which is Malchus. Geducha Achacha is the Amshacha of Keser, which is through the three kavan mentioned before. Whereas B'nei Avicha is the drawing down of Abba, the two kavan, and these are Reuven and Levi. Chachan Chesed, Chachma Chesed Netzach through Gemilas Chasadim, and Dati Das Tferes Yisaid through Torah Nevlis Chesed Mem Chachma Shomayla, I don't know, something like that. Okay. Then Nevigarasha Bani is that Bidur and Shuva is one thing, that it's to going down. That you go down from a high place and you need to Trachlalis, you have to bring up to there, it's called Shuva, and so to the Neshama goes down is Yidu Terchaliyah. This closeness that comes from being poor, being oppressed, which is the bitterness of the soul on its distance until the Bahamas and the Gulf. We'll get the idea of a sabcha, transformation. This is greater, this is like the light that comes from the darkness. There's enough what it says, ma ahu sit v'chulu. This pasuk speaks about the era of Mashiach. It follows the earlier promise, that kingship will never leave Yehuda until Mashiach arrives and the nations gather to him. Then this blessing will reach its full expression, that binding the donkey to the vine, meaning the spiritual reality of that time. Our sages teach there is no essential difference between this world and the era of Mashiach, except that then the Jewish people will no longer be under the yoke of exile. The era of Mashiach is not the world to come after Tchias Mesim. That future world is where the true reward for mitzvahs is given. The era of Mashiach is still a time of daytime, the time of doing mitzvahs, not the time of receiving the reward. And the full perfection of daytime, the perfection of action, will be in the era of Mashiach. Just as in Gan Eden, Adam's work was la'avdol Hashem, to serve the positive mitzvahs, to guard, which is the negative mitzvahs. That was the ideal state of serving Hashem through action, until sin and mankind was sent away. Later, our ancestors entered Eretz Yisrael specifically to fulfill the mitzvahs tied to the land, as so many of them can only be done there. And even that, they didn't hold on to forever, and were exiled again. But in the days of Mashiach, soon, in our days, mamish, the service of Hashem will return to perfection. We say every day that then we will bring our offerings again, because the main avodah is in the action of karbanis, which in Golos we cannot perform. So tefillah was established to replace them. But tefillah is still not mamish committed to tzinacha. This is difficult. Isn't tefillah spiritually higher? Tefillah lifts the soul upward, speaking the praises of the Creator, building to v'yahavta b'chol nafshecha. And karbanis are physical animals, even simple sheep and bulls. Why then is the perfection specifically about karbanis? This is hinted to in the pasuk Gefen Mitzrayim Tasiyah. The Jewish soul is compared to a vine. A vine produces grapes, and through pressing in a wine press comes wine. And the best wine comes from the grapes that grow close to the ground. So too the greatest spiritual wine comes from us when we are low and humble. Nafshi kafar lakol tia. Our ego crushed like grapes under the feet. From that brokenness comes the revelation of the hidden love inside the heart. Because just as wine is hidden in the grape and revealed through pressing, so the soul's deepest love is revealed through challenge and avodah. There are two types of wine, two types of love for Hashem. There is wine that brings joy, a clean white clarity of holiness, delight in Hashem, where the heart expands. And there is wine that intoxicates, a fiery red wine, the bitterness of the heart when a Jew realizes how far they've fallen. And this pushes them to cry out to Hashem with a powerful longing that overturns darkness to light. Both are holy, both are needed. On Shabbos we say, V'yanuchu v'yisrael kadosh shemechem. The Jewish people sanctify Hashem's name. Hashem's essence is utterly holy beyond all holiness. But through mitzvahs, a Jew draws that holiness onward because mitzvahs are his will, higher than Chachma. And the will of Hashem, which is revealed through mitzvahs, is rooted higher than all worlds. Therefore, 1 hour of tshuva and mitzvahs in this world is greater than all the life of the world to come, because in the next world the soul only basks in the light of his name. But through mitzvahs in this world one connects to his essence. The mitzvahs become garments for the soul. Just like it says about Avram, that he was Baba Yamim, with spiritual garments prepared from the mitzvahs he did. But the mitzvahs only create this connection when performed with joy. Joy breaks through all boundaries, reveals the inner light, and washes the spiritual garments clean like clothing laundered in wine. This is the meaning of kibbutz b'yayin levushay, that through the wine of a joyful mitzvah observance, the soul's garments become radiant and clean. Even those who have many mitzvahs but remain distant, like pomegranate full of seeds, their garments are still dirty because they lack the inner life of joy in bittul. But through the two wines, the white wine of delight and the red wine of broken-hearted longing, the garments become cleansed inside and out from the body of the soul to the head and face, to the point that the soul can look toward the King's glory. All of this is the avodah now in exile, to refine ourselves and reveal the hidden love. But the completion of this will be in the era of Mashiach, when even physical reality will be elevated, the karbanos themselves will ascend, the animals elevated in holiness, creation revealed in its source, and the prophecy of an enigla k'void Hashem b'ro kabal yachtal will be fulfilled. Godliness revealed openly in the physical. This is the perfection hinted to in the verse that in the era of Mashiach, when Adam, man, is completed, the entire Jewish people will be elevated to the level of the vine and its wine. The Yud, the point of supernal Chachma, complete bittul, is tied and bound to the vine, drawn down into the soul, transforming the wild city, the untamed human nature, into Ir Hashem, the city of Hashem. The word tzedekah refers to a young, tender vine branch, still soft, early in its growth, producing only a small amount of grapes, so only a small amount of wine comes from it. The term tzedekah refers to the nekuda, the vowel mark shudik, a single point with a line, a specific configuration. Now, the vine, the gefen, is connected with the nekuda sega, 3 points, arranged triangularly. This matches the puzzle gefen mitzrayim tasiyah gemer kisei Harem Tzila, that you uprooted the vine from Egypt, the mountains were covered in its shade. The word Tzila, shade, is like Hashem Tzilcha, Hashem is your shadow, the hidden aspect of godliness that rises up and covers over the mountains, referring to the Avos, the patriarchs. The Avos themselves are 3 levels, aligned like a sega, 3 points, the perfection of the vine. But Tzedekah, the Shuruk, has those same 3 points, but they are not in the same alignment. Instead of being balanced like a triangle, they are positioned one beneath the other, descending. This expresses 2 different spiritual states. When a person feels close to Hashem, uplifted with fiery enthusiasm, his soul energy is aligned like the structure of the segel, 3 points operating in harmony. These are the 3 aspects of Avodah, rising upward, drawing downward, in the middle that unite them. This is balance, wholeness, presence. When a person feels distance, not able to come close, not able to stand upright spiritually, yet he acknowledges his distance, admits his lowliness, and bends himself in humility before Hashem, he is like the shuduk, 3 points but descending, one under the next. He cannot stand in full alignment. He feels unworthy to step forward. He remains bowed and bittul, saying, who am I that I should come close? And this humility itself becomes his elevation. Through this humility, the donkey, the asum, which represents the coarse and stubborn part of a person, is transformed into bini, a child. Like it says, meaning the person becomes like a child to Hashem, the way a child is literally the leg of the father, an extension of the father's being. The lowest parts of the self become vessels to reveal the deepest relationship. This transformation from Sereka to Geffen, from Asayna to Bini, happens through the cleansing described in the pasuk, Kibis B'yayin Levoshe. The word Kibis is past tense, meaning it is already accomplished. The completion of the era of Mashiach, the perfection of the human being, reaching the level of Irei, the tethered bond, and Ben, revealed child, will come as the result of the cleansing that has already been done in Golus, because the exile itself, with all its darkness, pressure, and challenge, has washed us in wine. The wine of exile is the wine of hidden love and joy in mitzvahs, specifically born out of struggle. The fire that comes from is Hapcha and Shechel and Haida, transforming darkness to light. And that transformation is the entire purpose of exile, the preparation for Mashiach. Chachlili einayim yayin leven shnayim mechalav, eyes reddened from wine and teeth whitened from milk. By wine, it says, the wine that brings joy to God. We need to understand, what does it mean, wine that makes God rejoice? How can something be so powerful? Chazal say, nichnas yayin yotasai, that when wine enters, the hidden emerges. In Torah, there are 2 categories, wine and milk. As it says, the chushivru v'ichlu, these correspond to 2 loves, Avas Olam and Avad Abba. Avas Olam is love that comes from contemplation, visible, felt. Avad Abba is a deeper hidden love rooted in the soul's essence. Why is hidden love called Avad Abba? Because Avas Olam is drawn from created worlds. The person reflects how Hashem is constantly renewing existence, through Malchus, giving life to all worlds, but this giving of life is not like a soul inside a body. The soul actually enters the body. Hashem is completely beyond. The worlds receive only the radiance of His name. That is why we say, Yishtabach Shimcha La'ad. And we ask that the name not remain distant and hidden, but be drawn down into actual revelation that reaches inside the mind and heart. This is why Pesukei Zimra was instituted, to expand on Hashem's greatness until this sense becomes real, not just theoretical. Then one can say Shema Yisrael with depth, Shema meaning understanding, realizing Hashem Echad, that all existence, the 7 heavens, the earth, and the 4 directions are nullified to the Aleph, Aluf Eshel Olam, like the heavens above and below, spiritual gradations all nullified to Him. Then comes Baruch Shem, that from the large Dalet of Echad comes Hamshacha, drawing Hashem's presence into the worlds, Shem Kavod Malchusay, and from there the person reaches Vehafta. Vehafta means Ratzin, that the person's will is transformed, that Hashem is his God, B'chol Levavcha, with both inclinations transforming darkness to light, uprooting desire for nonsense, and becoming aligned only with Hashem. That entire process is Avas Olam. It fits into the human vessel and can be felt. But Avad Abba is the essence of the soul. Chelek Havaya, Mimal Mamash, Hashem says, Ani Havaya see, He is beyond the worlds entirely. No comparison exists. Even the metaphor of a drop versus the ocean is incomparable, because a drop and the oceans are both water. Hashem is infinitely beyond any comparison. Therefore, this love cannot fit into the soul structure. It remains hidden, revealed only in moments of B'chol Meidecha, beyond limits. See Tanya, Perek, Mem Gimel, and Yutas. The difference. Avos Olam can fade when distracted. Avad Abba never stops. Even when the mind wanders, the love remains at a constant imprint. How does this hidden love become revealed? The wine of Torah reveals the secret of the soul. The hidden love breaks into revelation. Chazal say, because the love is called Kitayv, and Kitayv is hidden in Torah. Kitayv leganzai. When the wine of Torah enters, the secret, the hidden love emerges. This is the Yudin, the contractions that limit infinity into creation. The Torah opens them, revealing Hashem's will, and therefore Torah and mitzvahs draw out the soul's will, the hidden love, into speech, action, and behavior. That's why we are asked, because Torah awakens that root. Then one naturally becomes to Vidibar Tabam. Now we return to Chachlili and Ayimiyai, and eyes refer to Einei Tamid El Hashem, the gaze of the soul constant. Einei Hashem El Yerei, of looking at the King's glory, love of the light, a level above both Avos Elam and Avad Abba. This is like Einecha Yenim, like two doves that gaze at each other and take pleasure. So too a person's heart is fully taken, constant yearning, devekas, fiery love that cannot be contained, only seen and sensed, love of the light. Like the Zayar on Ashivi Einech, eyes flaming with love, tasting the light of Hashem, Tainag El Hashem. This is the level of a Shabbos, Ostasanak El Hashem. So the weekdays of Avodah, awakening the loves, so that on Shabbos the light shines on its own. All this comes from wine, the inner Torah, that is Chachlili, the palate, the Chech, that says Li. It becomes mine, internalized step after step, joining Ma and Ban until the revelation of Shem Ab, the love of the light. Then the Leven Shnai Mechalov, teeth grind food, making it digestible, able to nourish without chewing. The food passes through without benefit. So too spiritually. One must grind one's thoughts, words, and deeds, introspection, cheshbon nefesh, evaluating, sifting, refining midas, choosing what is holy, discarding what is waste, like the Gemara's term, medaktek by myself. Then the refined food the refined good becomes nourishment for the soul. This leads to milk. Like milk grows in infants' limbs, so too the milk of Torah grows the midas, chesed, gvura, teferes, netzach, yisoid, expanding them with gadlus hamichin until the person becomes a new being entirely, changed midas, all aligned to holiness. When we say that the limbs of the soul are the midas, we mean that their primary structure is the emotional faculties, chesed, gvura, teferes, netzach, yisoid. Within them are the intellectual faculties of chacham biradas, which sustain and give life to those midas. And each of these three categories of faculties contains within it all the others, which totals 81 inter-included aspects. Then each of these divides into three stages, Reish, Teich, and Seif, the beginning, middle, and end, which brings the total to 243. And the source of their expansion and growth is the drawing down of Chesed, the nurturing force, which brings the structure to 248, Heichasad, corresponding to the 248 spiritual limbs. This is Rachatzes B'chalav, milk washing the midas, turning them white, purified, clarified, elevated. Then Leven Shinayim, teeth whitened, clarity, light in the refinements, until the person can sense holiness like sight, instantly, not with effort, but naturally. This is the union of wine and milk, inner Torah and refining avodah, rising to Chachlili, Li, ascending higher and higher. Bir al Hanal. To understand what was explained above with Chachlili and Ayim Yayin, we begin with the idea that Torah is called both Yayin and Chalav, wine and milk. As the pasuk says, to explain this, we need to understand two kinds of love for Hashem, Avad Abba and Avos Olam. A love that comes from above, not created by the person, that's Avad Abba. It ignites on its own, a soul burning like a furnace without effort. Avos Olam, love the person reaches through contemplation, meditation, doesn't fall from heaven. You build it through thinking, through understanding. And then there is a third higher love, the greatest of all, called Ava B'Tanugim. This is not fire, not yearning, this is delight. Not reaching for Hashem, but basking in Hashem. There are four names, Ab, Sag, Ma, and Ban. The lower name, Ban, is the one that fell in the breaking of the vessels. The name Ma is the one that refines and elevates. First Shem Ban, which is Malchus Datzilis, descends into Biyah to elevate the fallen sparks of Rapachne Tzutzin. After that comes the Shem Ma to refine again, a second refinement. Every night, Malchus Datzilis goes into the worlds of Biyah to elevate sparks. As the Zayar says, Elef Turin Dachla Behema, Rabba Vishasis Loin Begmia Chad, the great animal, the Behema, with the numerical value of Ban, eats the mountains, meaning it gathers up the sparks to bring them back to holiness. Because when the sparks fell into Biyah, into Klippas Nega, good and evil became mixed. They are not openly godliness anymore, and therefore Malchus Datzilis must extract them and make them godliness again. That is why Shem Ban is called Avos Olam, because it is the love that comes from the world, the love that was hidden before davening. It becomes revealed through davening. It comes from contemplation, from the world, from being moved by creation itself. Like when a person sees a miracle and feels their heart open, you witness something impossible, water turning to fire, or fire turning to water, opposite switching, and you see the fingerprint of the Creator, and that recognition pulls love out of hiding. That is Avos Olam, a love that has a reason. So too above, Shem Ban refines the sparks in Biyah. The love is born from worldliness, from being transformed into godliness, like someone who becomes religious because of a miracle they saw. This is Avos Olam, love that has a cause. But Shem Ma is called Avad Abba because Ma is pure godliness by nature, not holiness that comes from transformation like ban, but holiness that needs no fix. This is why Avad Abba has no opposite. Abba Salem has an opposite. It can disappear. One day you feel inspired, but the next day you're distracted by the world again, because its source is the world. But Avad Abba is the spark of the divine itself. It has no competitor, no other side that can extinguish it. Yet, there is a deeper truth. Even though Ma is higher, in order to elevate Ban, it must dress inside Ban. The higher love must descend into the lower love to refine it. Only then can the sparks be fully lifted. And above both of them is the third love, Ava B'Tanugim, the level of Shem Ab, which never dresses in the other two. Now we can understand how the drawing down of Ava B'Tanugim, Shem Ab, happens in actuality. It begins with when the two loves unite, Avad Abba and Avad Salem, meaning the union of Shem Ma and Shem Ban. When they interlock, not just interact, but to become one system of Avodah, then even though Ab is infinitely above them both, it is drawn down. They explain this. Every world, Atzilas, Bri, Yitzir, and Asiya, has 10 spheres, and also worlds and echalas, palaces within it. The 10 spheres of each world are pure godliness. They don't require refinement like the quality of Shem Ma, naturally aligned Talikus. The worlds and palaces are not automatically godliness. They need to be purified, clarified, and elevated, like Shem Ban, which deals with the broken pieces of reality, lifting them back. First, Ban ascends, taking the worlds and palaces with it, the raw materials of creation, as an offering upward. It's called Man, Mayin Nukfin, a feminine upward yearning. Then Ma descends like Mad, Mayin Dechurin, a masculine light, to refine again, to give clarity, to make the elevation stick. This is the meaning of the union of Dochar v'Nukva, of male and female, Havaya Lakim, the masculine, the feminine, Ma and Ban, the two Shemis of Hashem. The verse says, Zachar Nekeva Bram v'Yavarach Eis. Zachar is Ma, Nekeva is Ban. And v'Yavarach Eisam is the drawing down of Shem Ab, which is the blessing, the overflow, the delight, like a chassan and kala standing under a chuppah. They're not alone. There is the third reality present, the makif, the canopy, the presence that surrounds them and fuses them. Two finite beings stand together and infinity enters. The third presence, the relation of Ab. So too in Avodah, when Ban first refines reality, elevating the raw physical, the chaos, the distractions, and Ma descends and clarifies again, integrating holiness, then Ab shines, because now the vessel is ready, and the infinite does not rest in a place of lack, only in a place of holiness. This is also why Shem Ab is the revelation of Tainik pleasure, because its source is in Atika Kadisha. We see a mushal in the soul. The true pleasure breaks out when a person has a new flash of insight, a moment where the mind opens up, and you see a concept from the inside, from the source. That is Shem Ab, pleasure as revelation, and that is why Shem Ab is called Ava B'Tanugim. This explains the pasuk Chachlili and Ayim. Chazal say, Kol Chech Hatayim Eimer Li. The taste buds, when they taste something, they say something refined. They say Li, mine. Why the double language? Because two ascents are happening: the ascent of Shem Ma, Avad Abba, the ascent of Shem Ban, Ava Salem, and they're both meeting in Ab and Atik, Arachanpin, where they become pleasure. Chech Hatayim, the palate, the tasting faculty, corresponds to Chachma Datzilas. That is why it's called Chech, because Chachma is the point of tasting truth. It's where the infinite meets the mind. There are four components in Torah: Taimim, Nekudas, Tagan, and Eisius, Tansa, corresponding to the four names of Ab, Sag, Ma, and Ban. Tamim relate to Ab, the pleasure hidden in the flavor of Torah. Just like physical taste, something sweet and delicate, you enjoy it. So too in Chachma, taste is the revelation of Atik itself. The soul is overtaken with delight. This is the secret of Nichas Yayin Yatzasai. When the wine enters the inner dimension of Torah, the concealed secrets, the hidden love emerges. The Avad Abba surfaces and clothes itself inside of Abba Salem, the fire inside the vessel, and the combination calls down Ab. So Chachlili and Ayim Yayin means the redness of the eyes, the passionate fire comes from the wine, because the wine awakens the Say, the union of Ma and Ban, which births Ab. And where is this experienced in life? On Shabbos. Shabbos is Mechem the Abba. It's the revelation of Einik pleasure. Matika Kadisha into Chachma Datzilas. That's why the pasuk says, "V'karas la Shabbos Einik." You must call the pleasure you draw it into Chachma. That is also why Chazal say, "Kol ha'emer v'yechulu b'Shabbos." Not the shutuf l'Hakadosh Baruch Hu v'na'aseh b'reishis. Whoever says v'yechulu on Shabbos becomes a partner to Hashem in the acts of creation. Because on Shabbos the world is not being made; it's being enjoyed. A partner is not the worker; he is the one who shares the profit. And this is the reason that eating on Shabbos is avoided, because the food becomes the medium for Atik to enter Chachma, and from Chachma to enter the soul. But this is conditional. Only one who struggled. On the weekdays, the avodah of Ma inside Ban, the refinement, the discipline, the effort, can taste the eating of Ab on Shabbos. That's Chachlili and Ayim Yayin, because there are two aspects in the eyes: the redness and glow, the fire, the intensity, the yearning, and the whiteness, clarity, peace. the light when the fire has finished its job. The weekday is Shabbos, the weekday is the fire is weekday, the delight is Shabbos. So the idea here is that admimos, that redness, represents the burning excitement. Fiery sparks of longing to look at the glory of the king. Like it says, the eyes are ignited with the shalheven, the chamusa, flames of love. And similarly, the Rab explains that when Zah looks at the mitcha, the arech, the forehead of arech, receives shinai nahedin, 370 lights. And in the face of the kufnun nahedin, the 150 lights, as in the pasuk, ki yikare kan tzipra lefanacha. What this means is that arech anpin, which is keser, is the lowest level of the matzil, the creator. And Zah is the source of Bria, Yitzir, and Asiyah. That's why Zah is called Elam, like the pasuk Elam Chassid Yibana. Because of this, Zah becomes inflamed, yearning to be included above in the Ein Seif, in Arech Anpin. And this is also the avodah of a person down here, to look at the glory of the king, Einei Tamad al Hashem, that fiery excitement from below to above, and it happens specifically through the eyes. That's the redness in the eyes. It signals that excitement, those sparks of fire. And through the gaze of Zah, with that fiery excitement, and afterward the Sheva flows from Arech Anpin back down to Zah. Like it says, Einei Hashem el Yereyev, because first there was Einei Tamad al Hashem, the upward striving, like me, Shetarach better Shabbos, like one who puts in the effort first, then receives afterwards. That's how the light and Shefa come from above to below to be Ein Hashem. That's what is meant by Shinai Nahedin, the Kuftan Nahedin, that Zah receives from Arech Anpin, the Shefa from above, the Bechina of Einei Dihu Chivor, the white eye, like the Idr says, V'itaschan Echad Chivra de Eina Tava Chulu. Sight is an external faculty. Unlike the deeper faculties like Chachma or the Midas, for Zah to gaze at the mitzvah of Arech Anpin and afterward receive the revelation of light from there, that can only be through sight, which is from the outside, not entering inward. Then there is Leven Shinayim, the teeth clarified and refined. This is like an ubar, a fetus bebeten ima in the mother, the midas being in the intellect. Seeing with the eyes of the mind what the midas are, inspecting and examining them if there's any mixture in them. That's bebeten ima. And above in Zah, there's tlas klilin gemer and tlas chulu. Not sure exactly what that is. And what becomes clarified becomes atzilos and nelikos, and the waste is pushed out. And so it continues upward, level after level, and afterward there is growth through milk after the birth, drawing light and vitalities that the midas shine and become clear. That's leven shinayim, the teeth becoming white from the power of the milk. During the clarification process, they are not yet white because he is still occupied with looking and examining. That is the stage of katlas. But leven shinayim, when the teeth become white and shining, that is after further refinement, bitter achar bitter. And all of this is through pesach hasidacha, the aspect, the bechina of yud gimel tikun tikna, yudin and vaven, hairs and hollow channels, where Abba Chachma nurses from the 8th Mazel Neitzer, which forms letters of Ratzin. Through this, Ratzin is created for every living being. This is through the Torah of Abba, drawing the light of Abba into the soul, and Abba nursing from the 8th Mazel, as mentioned. Then within the person, the Ratzin is revealed that is far higher. The metaphor of Yudin and Vav, the Yud is the constricted light in the skin of the face, covered, only emerging through a small opening. And the Vav is the drawing down, like here's V'dai le Maven. Hoysafis for Vaychi. ואני נשאתי לך שכם אחד על אחיך אשר לקחתי מיד המדי בחרבי בקשתי. Unclus translates, what does that mean, בחרבי בקשתי? But Slicey Busi with my prayers and my requests. Right away there's a question, what does Shechem Echad actually mean? What's this unique portion? What does it mean, Asher Lakachti, that Yaakov took it? We don't find anywhere that Yaakov fought battles like that, so what's going on? Then it says, by Yerushalayim, Shamal, Shvat, and Shiftei Ka, Lahidus, the Shemavayit. We need to understand what does Alu, they went up, mean here. And by Yosef it says, Yosef had a Mitzrayim, Yosef was brought down to Mitzrayim. So what's higher? What's lower? How does this all fit? The idea is like this. Imagine someone calls a person a nediv, a generous soul. You're such a giver, you're a kind person, and they call him that in order to awaken that generosity inside. They're not creating something new. They're drawing out what's already hidden in his heart into expression. Even if that person is angry, upset, really not in the mood, still, if someone comes and asks with humility and calls him Rachman, Chastan, a merciful and kind one, the anger can fall away, and instead what gets triggered is compassion. Why? Because kindness is always there in the hidden state. If the potential wasn't there inside to begin with, calling him those names wouldn't do anything, especially when he's in the opposite mood. But since the potential is there, even concealed, the asking and calling awakens it and brings it into reality until even the anger flips over into compassion. This is a mashal, a parable for the midas above. All the spheres, all the holy attributes are called by names, like Lahidus Hashem Avaya, because the Atmas, the essence of Ein Seif, Lavne Kol Ila Midas Iu Klal, is beyond all Midas entirely. His essence is even above Shem Havaya. So how does Havaya become a name of Chesed Rachman? That's through Halas Mayin Nukvin, our upward yearning, through calling him by these names. When we say Baruch Ata Havaya, when we praise and acknowledge that he is merciful and kind, that awakens and an arousal from above. Through that, the light of Chesed from Atzilus becomes drawn down, dressed specifically in the Shem Havaya of Chesed, and then it shines through the Keli of Chesed, and then it gives life to the lower world. Without our calling out, without our lost mind nukfin, the worlds simply don't register. They have no significant klal next to Atzilus. Like the pasuk, Magbila Shavas Mashpila Lidis, from his essence, nothing changes whether the world exists or not, any violation you see. Think back to the mashal. The hidden kindness in a human heart is higher than the little bit of giving that comes out when someone asks for help. It's above being defined by the act of giving. So certainly above the level where all midas are not yet midas, that hidden level is infinitely beyond the chesed that comes out through our avodah. This is the meaning of Shamal Shvatim. The Hashvatim went up. The tribes were in a chariot to awaken the pnimius of the midas of Atzilus through their lost mind nukvin, their upward yearning. That's why the pasuk says, "Alu," they rose upward, so to speak, from below to above, causing an Isurus D'Leila, drawing the light downward so it can be received in the Kalim. But once that Isurus D'Leila happens, once that light descends, it is actually a huge descent. Like Chazal say, "Makam Gadlusa Shamat Ameti Anvasnusa." In his place of greatness, there you can find his humility, because the gap is infinite beyond the gap is infinite between his essential greatness and how he is called great, when that greatness becomes expressed in the Shem Havaya of Chesed inside Kalim. And this is the meaning of a Yosef Hered Mitzrayim. Yosef was brought down. Yosef represents Tzadik Chai Olman, one who gathers all higher lights. Yosef means Hashem will add again. Like the Medrash in the beginning of Shemais, Yosef Hashem Shein is Yadi, a second arousal, meaning that the awakening of the Midas becomes drawn down into the Kalim of Atzilus, which limit and measure that light. That's Mitzrayim. From the word Mitzara Megvulim, boundaries and limitations, light becomes contracted into vessels of the Midas until it can reach the lower worlds. This is a tremendous descent. So what was an aliyah for the Shvatim, calling Hashem by the name Havaya, awakening from below, that itself becomes the descent of Yosef, who becomes called Sevev and Mamale, different modes of revelation, each a limitation compared to the essence. And now we come to the phrase, Vayinesati lecha Shechem Echad. Shechem means shoulder. The shoulder represents the Acharayim, the backside, light that is given not face to face, but thrown behind the back, as if someone tosses something over their shoulder. That's why the forces that receive from the back, from Acharayim, are called Elikim Achedim. They feed off the backside of Shem Elikim. But through Torah and mitzvahs, the true unification happens. Havaya Elikim, Havaya Echad, Ushmai Echad, the upper unity and lower unity, Yichudei Allah and Yichudei Tata, where the inner source of all life becomes revealed. Like it says, Ki imcha mekarchayim be'uchin, are the radiance that used to just hover around as the makif. A surrounding light becomes revealed in a way that we can grasp, and then the ayin, the true nothingness, the essence is the reality, is the real reality, and the yesh, the somethingness, becomes secondary, the opposite of how it looks now. This is Ben Peres, Yosef Ben Peres Al Yayin. Don't trust what the eye sees. The yesh isn't the main thing. What's above comprehension, stima dechol stimin, that's the real truth. In that time, love the Shechem Echad. Hashem will turn the nations in a clear language, purified from the mixture of good and evil that fell in the shattering, and they will serve him Shechem Echad with one shoulder, meaning the externality will be subjugated and become one with the inner truth. It says by Shem and Yafes, Va Yikhu ha-simla v'yasimu al shechem shneim v'yelchu achiranis. They carry the garments on both of their shoulders and walk backwards to cover their father. This is connected to Azab Echalam Safa Bruda. The nations who will be refined are specifically the descendants of Shem and Yafes, not Cham. The Medrash says that in the 7th millennium, a third of mankind will be lost and 2/3 will remain. The idea is that the Acharayim, the backside, will be purified. Shem and Yafes can be elevated. Cham, rooted in the deepest impurity, cannot be elevated. His tikkun is destruction. Like it says, of the Rishayim, sometimes the arrogance of the Klippa is so thick that the only revelation is its end. La Shmidam Ad. But Shem and Yafes can be refined. They will hide from fear of Hashem, run to caves, meaning their ego collapses, and they turn around. That's why by Shem and Yafes it says that they took the garment and went backwards, submitting the external to the internal. Now we return to the phrase, Asher lakachti miyad ha'emedi v'charbi. We must understand, What is my sword? Yaakov never fought physical wars. It says, a double-edged sword. Why two edges? Because the nourishment of the external forces comes from two directions. One, when the Yid lowers himself into negative desires, then from above, negative waters are drawn, unholy flow, feeding the klippa from the Achadayim, even though Hashem is beyond all worlds. Still, their pull is from the back, because we, by choosing something low, have awakened that flow. Because I'll say in Shabbos 56b, when Shlomo took Pari's daughter, the angel Gabriel planted a reed in the sea, and a sandbar formed, an image of how a tiny action below can set spiritual decline into motion. 2. The second edge is the opposite, gaiva, arrogance. When someone inflates themselves without even doing an avera for taiva, just ego, this also feeds the klippa. In takbir kanesha, they lift themselves up like an eagle, like the wrestling with the angel, vayavik ish imay. Through arrogance alone, they open channels of negative nourishment. Now we go back. Now we get to the root of this arrogance. Where does the chutzpah of the klippa come from? It begins below by us. When a yid, because of physical comfort, wealth, honor, status, his heart becomes lifted up. Even though he knows deep down his lowliness, he still carries himself with pride. Not from reason, not from truth, just a bloated sense of self. From that ego down here, ruach ruach, a spirit down here awakens the spirit above, meaning this physical arrogance stirs up the arrogance of the external forces above. Then the klippa starts to say, I created myself, it becomes brazen. The ego of the other side is empowered. Even chutzpah towards heaven has an effect. Chutzpah, I lo klippa shmaya mahani. They receive extra sustenance from this. This is why the pasuk speaks of a sword with two sharp edges, cheref pefias. One edge cuts what's above them, and the other cuts what's below them. Because there are two kinds of nourishment that feed the chitzonim. From the arrogance and inflation, a receiving from the side of keser, the crown, the high place that falls, nafla teres teshenu, the upper edge of the sword cuts off that channel. Misham eridacha, from there I will bring you down. The other way is from the self. The other side is from the self-indulgence and taivas, chasing unhealthy loves. There, the lower edge of the sword severs that connection as well, removing them and receiving from the side of holiness. Now, where does this double-edged sword come from? How is it formed? The pasuk says, "Reim is kel b'greinim." The exalted praise of Hashem is in their throats. From this comes the double-edged sword. Think of how our sword works. It separates the head from the body. It cuts the connection so the body can't receive flow from the brain. Spiritually, this means cutting off the channels through which the chitzonim receive life. In the body, there are three pathways from brain to heart. The kana, the windpipe, brings the moistness from the brain through the lungs into the heart. The nerves descend to give subtle life. The veshet, esophagus, brings food for nourishment. The veins carry the refined essence of the blood from heart to the brain. The veshet is in the middle, between the other two, because food becomes blood. Blood is mixed with water. Some goes up to strengthen the brain, and the watery part returns to strengthen the heart. Everything is interconnected, above to below and below to above. Every organ structure matches its function. This is all a mushal to explain how above there are also three channels of flow to the chitzonim, the backside nourishment. Star hamashkim, like the kana, drawing kindness downward. Sarat habachim, like the heat of taiva, fire rising upward from below, awakening flow to the klippa. Sara ifim, like the veshet, a mixture of both, speech, expression, the blend of mind and heart. The voice comes from the kana, the breath of the heart mixes into it, and the letters come from the thoughts of the mind. This is amidi. From the word amida, speech, this mixture is exactly why Yosef specifically says, I took it from the amidi. And that is why Yosef hung Sar ha'ifim in the interpretation of the dreams, because he includes the two others with him. And now we understand why the chitzonim are called kesel, fools. Foolishness is marked by words. Kel kesel, the voice of a fool. In too many words, sin does not cease. Meaning the flow of the klippa never stops when there is too much empty talk, because speech fuels them. Idle chatter below strengthens their connection above. And from where does all this begin? From machshavas zaros and davening, foreign thoughts, when a person is during Shemona Esrei, and these weird combinations of letters and nonsense float in. These are the broken combinations that give the klippa energy. The speech of the fool, the endless words of the emori come from there. And the opposite is also true. Too much empty speech all day creates these thoughts during davening, because emori speech is rooted in the blend of mind and heart. So the pasuk says, Hashem goyim Hashem breaks their plans and interrupts these foreign thoughts. Those foreign thoughts. That's asher lakachtem yad hamedi. All the nourishment is taken by the double-edged sword that severs the head from the body. Once the kana is cut, there is no more flow to them. Now, what forges the sword? Rem is kalbegdanim, praise in the throat, because everything the klippa has is only a copy of holiness. Whatever exists is impurity. In impurity was preceded by its source in kedusha. So just like the three officers exist in klippa, their holy counterpart exists in kedusha. The kana is in holiness is kana chachma, drawing the water of Torah from chachmei law. It connects what you learn with your heart, making Torah something you actually live. The same way the physical windpipe connects thought to heart, the spiritual connects Torah to the heart. This is how the sword is made. This is how flow is cut from the other side through exalted praise, davening with remes, lifting your voice and your heart until the channels that used to feed the clipper are shut down. So now the same pattern shows up in davening when the heart actually catches his sense of Seva Kalam, and that level of elikos that's beyond the shtachshlos, the level called remes, lofty godliness, also referred to as kana. Why? Because the person managed to take a conception that was only in the mind, the idea of Havaya Seva Kalam, and bring it down into his heart. Like the pasuk says, the Shavisa Elavacha, bringing it into the heart from above to below. And like the Zohar says, Neida Basharim, Kel Chad, Lafum the Meshar Belibe. It's known in the gates, meaning each person according to what they can measure in their heart. In other words, when the heart actually feels the contemplation, that is what's called Sar HaMashkim Kedusha, the cupbearer of holiness. When it brings the wine, the chayas, into the heart, then there's something else, the veins, the fiery pull upward, reverse direction from below to above. This is the level of a Rav Tabachan, translated Rav Kutulya, the chief butcher, meaning the movement is rising, like fire rising opposite to water. This is the fiery enthusiasm, the passionate longing and burning in davening that comes from the heat of the blood, the physical vitality of the body itself rising toward elikos. And that fire lifts the hashpah from below to above, so the neshama grasps elikos more powerfully. Just like physical veins carry blood upward, so too the spiritual vein work carries the soul upward. And that's why this level is called Rav Ketulya, the one that slaughters, because its main job is to kill off the taivas of the body. The very blood that once fueled these urges now agrees willingly to rise upward in passion for Hashem. While Sar HaMashkim is more about the experience of contemplation, Rav Ketulya is what actually breaks the body's resistance. And then we have the Sara'if from the baker. This is the power of speech. The deeper specifically in Divrei Torah. Torah is called lechem, bread, and bread becomes blood. It becomes the substance of life. That's the meaning of achalti yari. The idea that Yisrael, Mefarnes and Lavim Shabashamayim, through Torah and mitzvahs, we sustain, so to speak, our Father in heaven. So the heart of davening is the root of for the entire day. Because when Torah Hashem actually settles in the heart through the level of Sar HaMashkim, it becomes the root of drawing elikos downward into the Ramach mitzvahs, the 248 positive mitzvahs, and through Sar Tabachim, the fiery enthusiasm the person accomplishes, Sur Midah, staying away from the Shasa, Loisza, the 365 prohibitions all day. In other words, three forces in the soul. Sar HaMashkim, contemplation settling in the heart, draw godliness down, source of mitzvah. Sar Tabachim, Rav Ketulya, fiery longing, slaughtering the animalistic urges, power of Loisza. Sara'ifim, speech of Torah, making the elikos digestible, part of the blood, and life itself. This is the Avodah structure rooted in davening that energizes the whole day. These then are the two mouths of the sword, used lases nakam going to exact retribution from these nations, because when these three officers of holiness are strengthened from the inner level of Chachma, Vatzilos to Sar HaMashkim, drawing from Chachma, then excess flow no longer gets drawn into the Eiruf of Keser through the three officers of Pari. On the contrary, the evil is refined, transformed into good, and Yispardu Kol Poiliavim, from the Remus Kale in the throat of holiness itself becomes a double-edged sword against the three officers of Pari, separating them with the upper mouth through the mitzvahs asay, and with the lower mouth through the loisaseh, as explained above. And this is the meaning of the Yosef Mitzrayim, the higher Yosef, the level called the Remus Kale, is brought down into the throat into the constriction, Meitzar of holiness, in order to refine and sever the nourishment of Pari, who receives this through his three officers. At first, Yosef is sold as a slave, specifically to Tzar Tabachim, and since Yosef's Merkava was extremely lofty, rooted in Atzilus itself, he was able to refine the level of Acharayim of the supernal Eidif and Atzilus. Therefore, it says, Vani nasati lecha shechem echad ala chacha. Shechem means the backside, the Acharayim, and the backside that Yosef refined became the root and source for the refinement of the tribes below in Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah. This is the meaning of al achacha, and this is because Asher Lakachti Betzlusi, through my prayer, which is Charbi, my sword, the sword of Hashem with two mouths, through Remis Kel Begrenim, as explained earlier. And since Gufa Ubris Chashev Chad, the body and the covenant are considered one, therefore, through Yaakov's prayer, this was automatically strength and power granted to Yosef. There was automatically strength and power granted to Yosef to accomplish all of this. Now we understand the Kashti Ubebusi, but the Kashti means request, but it also refers literally to a bow, keshet, and this corresponds to the request in Shemini Esrei. And Becharbi refers to Krishma, because the 248 words of Krishma are called Ramcha V'charba, a spear and a sword, take from the hand of the Amori, Likewise, the supernal speech of the Torah stands in opposition to the Dibur of the Emedi, which is the speech of Klippa. And about this it says, because we need to understand why this explains the nullification of the multitude of thoughts. The phrase Rabbas Machshavas implies that the problem lies specifically in multiplicity, many combinations, rather than a single thought. And the explanation is known. The proliferation of the words of Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya come from the many different combinations of the supernal letters, which are called Kalim. Before this descent into many combinations, there was only one thought, a single unified combination, like a person grasping something with one encompassing thought. When he begins to analyze details, many combinations form in his mind. Because of the multiplication of combinations in the supernal letters, the flow descends further and further until there is even grasp and nourishment for the external forces. But when Hashem says Vayehi with a single thought, as before, contraction, this breaks the council of the nations and nullifies the thoughts of these people. Atzas Hashem Hisakim refers to Knesset Yisrael, the inner level of the letters, while the thoughts of the nations collapse. This is why through the 248 words of Krishma, which he didn't unify every day, and through their Divrei Torah, they established the inner word of Hashem forever, and the Echaraim of the Emedi are nullified and dispersed. This is Becharbi, the sword of Krishma and Torah, standing against the Emedi. However, to subdue clippers that exist in a deeply concealed state, which have not yet emerged into revealed speech, the sword alone does not suffice. A sword can only kill what is close, not what is distant and hidden. For that, the bow is needed to shoot an arrow far away and destroy what is distant. The drawing of the bow increases the force of the arrow so it can reach further. All of this is a mashal for the difference between B'tzloisi prayer as cleaving and closeness to Hashem through mysterious Nevishin, Krishma, and Shemon Esrei, and Bavusi, the requests in Shemon Esrei, which are far higher, because through request and supplication, a person first comes to extreme lowliness and humility, and the greater the humility and submission he shows, the more he awakens Rachmim B'Rabim, the source of all supernal encompassing lights, before which all darkness is pushed aside. Even the encompassing forces of the clippers are nullified. The intensity of the awakening of compassion depends entirely on the degree of smallness and humility shown in the request. This is like drawing the bow further and further. The more it is drawn, the farther the arrow flies, until even the most hidden and concealed levels of klippa, called chayshach, anan, varafel, are completely destroyed. To understand the root of all this, we must first understand the root of Yosef and the tribes. In the writings of the Rizal, it is explained that the tribes are from the level of Atzilus as it shines into Bria, in the Heichal Kodesh Kodashim, and they are called the lower Merkava. This is what the Zohar means by the 12 oxen upon which the sea stands, meaning that Malchus of Atzilus, called Yam Elyon, rest upon them. These correspond to the 4 banners. But Yosef was from Atzilus itself, and the body of the tree, the level of Yesod, and he was the upper Merkava for the inner aspect of the Midas. Therefore he says, Hashem atachas elikim ani. Now, we need to understand, why didn't they recognize him according to his true lofty level? Since Yosef was a Merkava, how did they consider him so far beneath them? The explanation is this. The concept of the Shvatim comes from the word Hamshacha, drawing downward, like Chechva Deshavet, a shooting star, meaning something that is drawn from a high place down to a lower one. It's like branches that extend from a tree. A branch isn't considered the actual body of the tree itself. It is a small extension that stretches outward and downward, far from the trunk, with its root drawing nourishment from the body of the tree, but its end descending all the way down to the earth. The same is true of a shooting star. It descends and distances itself. So too, as a mashal, we can understand that the root of the souls of the Shvatim is indeed in Atzilus itself, which is called the Ilan. But they are like the branches that extend downward, meaning their function is to illuminate Bria. This is the meaning of Yud Beis Bakarish Heim Emed Aleim, the 12 oxen upon which the sea stands. That is, the illuminations of Atzilus, as they are joined with Bria, are called the lower Merkava, upon which Malchus of Atzilus itself stands. And this is the idea of the integration of Adonai within Havaya. When creation nullifies itself from its own limited existence and becomes a Merkava, like the branches relative to the body of the tree, then this is the integration of Adonai into Havaya, meaning the illumination of Atzilus within the Heichal Kodesh Kodashim as it is known. And this is the meaning of Shamal Shvatim, that the tribes went up. The Shvatim are those branches we spoke about earlier. They ascend upward toward Gufa De'ulna, the body of the tree, in order to awaken the Shem Havaya there. For them, this is a tremendous elevation, because there is no comparison at all between the body of the tree and its small branches. But by Yosef it says, V'Yosef Hayded, Yosef was brought down, because the root of Yosef is from the level of Yesod of Adam Kadmon, as will be explained, which is from the light of the Matzil within Atzilus itself. This is called the Gufa Dilana, and Yosef is called Yosef because Yosef Hashem Shenis Yadeh. Hashem will add again his hand, so relative to the level of the Matzil, for Yosef to be called by the name Havaya is actually a great descent for him, as will be explained, and this is why they did not recognize him at all, because there is no comparison between them whatsoever. What is an ascent for them is a descent for him. Now, This difference between Yosef and the Shvatim reaches all the way to the highest levels, specifically the distinction between Ma and Ban, which exists within every part of. It is known that from Malchus of Adam Kadmon came the root of the Shvira, the shattering of the 7 kings. They are called kings, as it says, Vayimlech, Bela, and so on. Their root is from Malchus. The 8th king, however, Hadar, did not die because he was above the 7 kings of Tayu. His root was from the Yesod of Adam Kadmon, which is called Hidra de Gufa, above the source of the shattering. Therefore, from him comes the tikkun and the refinement. This is from the new Shema, which comes, and this is from the new Shema, which comes from the Metzach of Adam Kadmon, as is known. And the level of Yosef corresponds to this Hadar. Yosef was Yefei Tayer, beautiful in form, as it is known. But the level of the Shvatim correspond to the 7 kings of Ban of Adam Kadmon. To understand what these kings of Ban of Adam Kadmon are and what Hadar is, the one who refines, we must first introduce a foundational principle. The essential Aryan Saif, blessed be he, cannot truly be called by any name at all, not even wise or kind, or even said to have will in his essence, because he is utterly simple, absolute simplicity. Will and wisdom, as we know them in a human being, are composite. Therefore, we cannot say that the relationship of the will and wisdom of Atzilus to the essence of Aryan Saif is like a flame bound to a coal, because a flame exists even if concealed within the coal, but within the essence of Aryan Saif, will does not exist even in concealment, since he is absolute simplicity. For this reason, his will is not compared to human will, and this is what it means when it says, knowledge would imply existence even in concealment. But here, that is not the case. Now, what is brought in the pardish regarding the 10 spheres being concealed within the essence is not meant in that way at all. Rather, it is only in the sense of calling a name. This is why the Zohar says that all the lights that are emanated from the essence are merely Rosh Shmei, the secret of his name. And likewise, in Eitz Chaim, it is explained that all emanations come only through the name, such as Ab, Sag, and so on. So how can we call the essential Ein Sof by the name wise, for example? This can be understood through a mashal from calling a person wise, even though the mashal is not fully comparable. Since in a human being wisdom exists in potential, still there is a similarity in one respect. When someone is called wise, this awakens his latent wisdom and brings it into revelation. Before he was called wise, he himself may not have been aware of his wisdom, but the calling awakens what was hidden, so that now it is as though he has become wise through that calling. So too above, through the calling of a name, the essence becomes a source that emanates the light of wisdom, and through calling him chesed, the essence is awakened to become the source of chesed, and this applies to all the details of the emanated light. They are all his names, meaning that prior to the calling he was absolute simplicity with no existence at all, even in concealment of being a source for emanated lights. The idea of concealment comes only through the calling and through the halos mein nukvin. Just as revelation from concealment is brought about by halos mein nukvin, so too the concealment itself is formed at that moment from the simple essence. This is exactly like a person's name. Before he is called by his name does not really exist within him, even in concealment, unlike wisdom or will. When he is called, he turns toward the caller. So too, in this mashal, the essence turns, so to speak, to be called Rav Chesed and the like. And even in concealment, the essence is now called by that name. Thus it becomes clear that the idea of awakening what is concealed below in a person is the parallel above to what is meant by the 10 concealed spheres. With this, we can understand the concept of Malchus of Adam Kadmon, which is the root of the 7 kings. The explanation is that the idea of calling a name, since it is the lowest level of all the levels of the essence, is therefore called Malchus, because the attribute of Malchus is revelation and outward expression alone, as is known. This is the meaning of Malchus of Adam Kadmon. For Adam Kadmon, in his essence, is the primordial level of the Matzil within the essence of Aryan Saif. And the fact that he can be called by a name in relation to the emanated beings, such as wise or kind, with Chachma Yediyah, this comes only from Malchus of Adam Kadmon, which is his name, and not from his essence, as explained earlier. And from the general concept of his name emerged the particular names of the 7 kings, which are the 7 meters concealed within the Matzil. This is the level of Shemban of Adam Kadmon, which is the root of the Shvatim below in Malchus of Atzilus, as it shines downward into the Heichal Kodesh Kodashim, as explained earlier. However, Hadar is the illumination of the essence of Adam Kadmon from the level of Yesod, which is above the level of name altogether. Therefore, he is above the concept of shattering, because the shattering only occurred in the letters themselves, as will be explained. For this reason, Hadar is the one who refines them through the new Shema, which emerges from the Metzach of Adam Kadmon, as explained elsewhere at length. Now we can understand the pasuk. The root of this matter is that the refinement of the Shvatim Malumim comes from Shem Ban, as it is in Bria Yitzir and Asiya, transforming evil into good. This is called Shechem, the level of Acharayim, but Yosef was refining at a higher level within Atzilus itself, from the shoulders of Arachanpin, which are the concealment of Arachanpin, which is called Pare, which are the Acharayim of Arachanpin, which is called Pare. The flow was redirected so that it would go from the inner aspect of Arachanpin to Chachma and Bina. This is Sar HaMashkim, Kana Chachma, and not toward the Acharayim of Arachanpin. This is the meaning of Shechem Echad. To explain this, we first need to understand what Acharayim of Arachanpin means. It is known and explained elsewhere regarding Shimamas B'yadayim to Tapes that during sleep the Meichim withdraw completely. Therefore, even a fly walks across a person's face, he does not feel it. The explanation is that when a person is deeply absorbed within himself, nothing opposite him takes up any space in his awareness. As we see plainly, when someone is deeply immersed in a concept, he does not notice another person speaking in opposition to him. But when the will descends and contracts into intellect, although this is a great contraction, it has a distinct advantage. Now the opposite occurs. Even the slightest opposition is felt sharply, because once the will is narrowed into reasoning and explanation, the person cannot tolerate opposition to his will and pushes it away entirely. That is why when a person awakens from sleep, he suddenly feels the fly. All this is a mashal to understand above the concept of Acharayim of Arachanpin. Arachanpin is the will itself, encompassing all particular revelations of will. The Acharayim of Arachanpin, as explained in the Siddur of Adam Hayinu, refers to a state where the inner aspect of Arachanpin does not shine. When a will is revealed, the inner aspect of Arachanpin shines within it, just as we see that the inner soul is bound up with a person's desire and longing. But in something a person does not want, there is no inner illumination of Arachanpin at all. Only a minimal glow from the Acharayim, like something thrown over one's shoulder. This is what is called the Acharayim of Arachanpin, and since the essence of will is extremely lofty, far above intellect, it is not constricted like intellect, but rather expansive without limit. Therefore, even something that opposes the will can receive a great deal of life force as long as the will has not yet been constricted into intellect. This is the meaning of Marach Apayim, Marach Afal Rishaim, that he is slow to anger even toward the wicked. Like the statement of Chazal, the explanation is that because the power of will is so immensely expansive, it also casts a great deal of flow behind the shoulders. A level of influence that they would never receive according to Chachma. This is the idea of Pare, the supernal Eidif, which receives nourishment from the Acharayim of Arachanpin. This is especially so when he is exalted and elevated within his essence, meaning that he withdraws from illuminating downward, as explained in the Pardes under the entry Aleph of Yud. This state is therefore compared to sleep, which is the mashal below in a person. When someone is deeply absorbed in the very essence of will, everything else becomes insignificant. He does not feel opposition to the revelation of his will. In that state, even opposing forces can receive abundant flow. This was the exile of Egypt. The Yosef had Mitzrayim. Yosef is Yisoid of Adam Kadmon, which shines into Galgalta of Arachanpin, the level called Baal Hadatzin. In a state like sleep, the Eidif, which is called Mitzrayim, receives from Yisoid of Adam Kadmon. That Yosef was brought down so far was precisely because of the intensity of exaltation in the essence itself, just as explained earlier with Shimamas B'yadayim to Tapes. This is also the reason that ministers of the nations receive nourishment, because the exaltation of the essence itself, as explained elsewhere. This is the meaning of Avadim Yinu Lapare. Zeir Anpin was in a state of Ibor within Bina, which is the meaning of Mitzrayim, Meitzar, Mi, and the entire essence of the Exodus was that the arms of Arach Anpin spread outward, as explained in the Kavanas of Pesach. The explanation is like this. In the Mashal below, when a person emerges from total absorption in the essence of will and comes into the revealed will of the arms, meaning Chesed and Gvura, right and left, according to Chachma and Bina, so to above, the will descends and clothes itself in Chachma and Bina, and because of this, the will now takes up space, so to speak, and can no longer tolerate opposition. This was Yetzias Mitzrayim, the refinement of the flow from the Acharayim of Arachanpin, as it says, Va'yinatzlu. The flow no longer goes beyond the shoulders of Arachanpin, but rather into the inner dimension. This is Torah and Mitzvahs, which are the revealed will of Hashem as it is known. And without the Exodus, there could not have been Matan Torah, because as long as the arms had not yet been spread outward, the will remained elevated in the essence and could not yet contract into Torah. This is like the mashal below, sleep, which is the withdrawal of the mechin until the level of yechida of the soul itself. This was the cause of Pari's nourishment, as explained. But after the exit of the constriction and the earth, there is room for Torah and mitzvahs. And beyond the fact that the flow which had been in the Acharayim returned to the inner dimension, there was an additional effect of the Exodus, even when the flow now enters Chachma, although Chachma is in a greater contraction than the pre-intellectual level, it now shines with far more of the inner aspect of Arachanpin than it did originally, even though previously he was more elevated in his essence. As it says, Yar Hashem Panav Elecha, Hashem will shine his face toward you, and this took place specifically at Matan Torah, as is known. The reason is that although intellect limits the will, because the very nature of intellect is constriction, nevertheless, from the side of the essence of will that is within it, there is a great advantage for when the will is revealed. This is the inner essence of the power of will itself, only that it is descended and become revealed. Not seifam b'tchilasan, and in its root, this is far more elevated within the essence than when the will is merely exalted in essence and does not yet want anything at all. So, too, we can understand, by way of analogy, the mitzvahs are revelations of will in our Chanpin, and although they are drawn down and constricted according to Chachma Bina, and from there extended into the Torah as we have it before us, nevertheless, the root is from the inner aspect of the Galgalta of our Chanpin, as is known regarding the Archin into 13 white hairs. Therefore, even though they descend through contraction, the inner illumination within them is far more elevated than the Acharayim of Archanpin. This is the meaning of Yara Shampana, the inner aspect of Archanpin, as is known, shining with an added illumination from the essence of Adon Kadmon, when it descends and contracts into Torah Mitzvahs, as explained earlier. So we find that the descent from absorption in the essence accomplished two things at once. First, the excess flow that had been going to the Acharayim of Archanpin was drawn back, as explained earlier. And second, a more inner illumination was brought into the inner dimension of Archanpin. Both of these occurred together, as explained. This is the meaning of Anina Satlacha Shechem Echad Arachacha. The refinement of the Shvatim was from the 288 sparks, and it took place at the level of the shoulders, the Shechem and Kasif of Archanpin of Bria, as explained earlier. Their root was only from Malchus of Atzilus. And even at the highest levels, their refinement reaches only the level of Shem Ban of Adon Kadmon, from which the Acharayim of Archanpin originate. But how can something refine itself? One who is higher than both can refine them. It is known that since evil receives its vitality from good, how can it be separated through Malchus, which gives life to everything? And similarly, in Shem Ban of Adon Kadmon, which is the level of name and Malchus, as explained, from which Acharayim also extend, as with Pari of Archanpin, how can it refine itself? This is the meaning of they were binding sheaves in the field, transforming evil into good, until the root of their root, even in the 7 kings of Ban of Adon Kadmon. But the refinement of Yosef was far more elevated, because one who is very high, rooted in the essence, is the true refiner at the deepest root, to the point that the flow does not descend at all to one who is unfit, and no later refinement is needed. So too here, Yesod of Adam Kadmon, which is the essence of Adam Kadmon, above the level of name, has the ability to illuminate from the essence into the inner dimension of Archanpin in such a way that from the outset the flow does not descend to Pare at all, certainly not the one who has already received. And also the second effect mentioned earlier, that there be an additional inner illumination in Archanpin so that Torah mitzvahs can exist. This too comes primarily from the level of Hadar, which is Yosef, Yesod of Adon Kadmon. This is through the new Shem Ma from the Metzach of Adon Kadmon, which comes the primary illumination of the force of Archanpin, as explained elsewhere. This seen in Kama Alumasi, from that Yosef Sheaf arose. His refinement was from the level of essence itself. Therefore, their sheaves bow to his sheaf, like a refinement that comes after refinement, as explained elsewhere. This is Shechem Echad, that the level of shoulder and Acharayim is included within true unity from the side of essence. Now we can understand that the root of this is the officers of Pari. The Eidif of Archanpin are Sara Mashkim, Sara Tabachim, and Sara Ha'ifim, corresponding to the Kanaveshet and veins. Yosef was sold as a slave into exile in order to refine refinements from Pari. And just as Yosef interpreted their dreams, so it happened. Yosef decreed in his interpretation that Sarah Ephraim be hanged, and he was hanged. And Sarah Mashkem, Yosef elevated in his interpretation, until Yosef himself was elevated to kingship and refined from Egypt and from Pari's officers all the good that was hidden in them. And all of this was only a preparation so that Torah and mitzvahs could later be given. This is why Sefer Bereshit preceded Matan Torah in Sefer Shmos.